Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of True Believers here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Of course, this is the show that covers everything that is happening in the MCU. And right now, all the talk, of course, is Daredevil Born Again. Now, we got episode 4 this week, which had a lot of significant moments in it. But I can't talk about the episode without bringing in my top notch law firm. However, we are missing Mr. Reitzel tonight. He got thrown off of a building and kind of bounced, but he's like Bullseye. I think he'll be recovered very soon and be back for the next episode. But joining me as always, he is a Marvel expert. He is Mr. Catpool himself, the one and only Mr. Cat Cedar. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Kyle. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing wonderful, and I want to thank
Awesome.
all the listeners out there for tuning into this episode of True Believers here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Whether you're listening to the audio version or you're watching here on our Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, we greatly appreciate it and are excited to talk some more Daredevil tonight. Of course, this is a spoiler reaction show. We are going to be talking about everything in episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again and a lot of interesting things to talk about. And we're not going to wait around. We're going to get right into some things here. Again, one final reminder, spoiler alert, guys. We're going to have fun. We're going to have some conversations. So let's get into it. Of course, you're listening to the Fandom Podcast Network. We always have a lot of fun around here, and we're going to have some fun now. And two, if you're watching on YouTube, scan the QR code that's up on the screen. It'll take you to our audio podcast website where you can listen to all the great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. So I'm going to leave this up for just a second. Give it a scan. And two, spoiler reactions. Talking about Daredevil Born Again. We haven't really talked about this, Cat. I love these posters that Disney Plus put out leading into Daredevil Born Again. What did you think of these?
I absolutely love 3 of the 4 are my favorite. Ironically, the one you just put up on the left there for the viewers who can actually see the video or watching it, just the red on red. I'm not that crazy about that one, but I love the black and white and red one on the right and the first 2 that you just showed.
Yeah,
Awesome posters. Yeah, those 2. I love those posters. It's just so they want to grab you and just like, here's Daredevil.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, there's Daredevil.
And two, if you're joining us, of course, we've already covered the first 3 episodes of Daredevil Born Again. Of course, the first episode that we did covering Born Again, the first 2 episodes dropped, Heaven's Half Hour and episode 2 Optics. And last episode, we covered everything the hollow of his hand. And of course, this week's episode, Sic Semper Systema. And we're going to, that has some meaning in this. And we're going to talk about that too. So the titles are getting interesting. But again, spoilers. But let's get into the plot synopsis of this episode because things happen, including the guy on the screen finally showing up in this. But this is episode 4, Sic Semper Systema. Fisk's old business associates take advantage of his absence to begin a gang war over his territories. Okay, so this is on me. I have some old notes, but basically in this episode, what we have is Matt kind of dealing with the fallout of what happened with White Tiger. We open up with the scene in the morgue where White Tiger's niece shows up and Matt won't let her see the body. Obviously, she doesn't want to see it, which kind of leads to some things, including maybe a future look at what we're going to have with the White Tiger. As the episode goes on, Matt is doing some investigative work on his own because he's not trusting what's going on with everything. And he runs down an old friend on suspicion, one Mr. Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. We also get some things going on with the Kingpin. It's not going well for him. He had to sit through some horrendous versions of We Built This City. I feel bad for him actually on that. Also, some of his aides are not helping him out either, as he gets pulled into a labor war with the garbage and the garbage people in New York City. And we also get in this episode too, we start seeing some of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes with the Kingpin and some of the dirty secrets that are coming up and the things that are happening between him and Vanessa and some of the fallout of that. Also, like I said earlier, Matt goes on investigation, finding the bullet casing and finding the Punisher logo on the bullet casing. After talking with Frank and having a pretty intense conversation with him, towards at the end of the episode, we see Matt open up a secret place where he still has all of his Daredevil equipment and like all the masks we see on the screen here. And we see him start training. We also see Muse really clearly for the first time getting his victims and what exactly he's doing with those victims. A little gruesome, just going to say it right now. It was a little rough, but it starts setting up the things. All the pieces are in place, Kat. I think that they've been put on the chessboard. So let's talk about our instant reactions to this episode.
Oh, dude, this episode, I don't want to say it was the best episode so far, but of the 4, this is definitely probably my second favorite. The first being the first episode, because it was just the first episode just grabbed you and pulled you right in. But this one was just like so, like you said, we see Frank finally, woohoo! We see Muse. I tell you, I'm not a guy who gets creeped out very easily by certain, but man, the guy who's playing, just his eyes, because normally you don't see Muse's eyes. They're normally black, and he has black over his slit so you don't see anything. But man, he just looked psychotic and creepy, and it looked freaking awesome. I can't wait to see what's going to happen more with him. And of course, Frank, as you said, he was great. The whole Frank and Daredevil scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, was great. But personally, for me, I loved when they had the Kingpin talking to his associate, the guy who spoiled the whole garbage thing, and the camera angle when it was over the Kingpin's shoulder and looking down made the Kingpin look so huge, like he normally, because in the comics he's like 6'6", 6'7", but Vincent D'Onofrio was obviously a lot smaller. And then when they came the opposite way over the guy's shoulder, he looked so intimidating. Like, you're like, okay, I see what you're doing. I'm sorry, you know. And other than that, I mean, the episode was just the whole Matt finding the bullet casing. I loved it. It was a great episode, personally.
I agree with you. I think this is the episode that really put, like I said, put all the chess pieces on the board, which I think is going to advance heavily in the next episode. We'll talk about that a little bit later in our next phase, but there's so much intrigue in this episode because you see after the death of White Tiger, Matt is really struggling. He's struggling that in his belief in the system at this point. He doesn't believe the police are ever going to investigate it thoroughly. So he goes into his own investigative mode, which leads him to Frank Castle. And it's good to see Frank and Frank realizing it once he realized it was Matt. But the conversation they had, Kat, I think was one of the most interesting conversations since the conversation in the diner back in episode 1 with Kingpin and Matt. Seeing both sides of the perspective of Matt kind of struggling, still trying to believe in the system, and Frank basically saying no, absolutely not. And also seeing Frank's anger at the so-called fanboys and copycat that are out there, yet he's still not doing anything about it because he's laying low. So you have Frank and Matt at this place where you feel like they're both on the borderline of doing something.
Yep, absolutely. I do like the one thing that Frank kept saying was to Daredevil, like, "Hey, Red." He kept referring to him from the comics.
Yeah, well, or even just referring back to the initial series as well. I mean, Frank mentioning the Halloween costume, all of those things. I think it was a very interesting turning point, but there was a lot of other little things going on in this episode too. And I think what this episode really did is, and it's something I've talked about through the whole series, is it was looking at the same two sides of the same coin that are the Kingpin and Daredevil, because here they are getting back pulled into their old ways. They both tried to take a different approach, and now they're getting pulled back in their own ways. With the Kingpin, it's the revelations of finding out about, Vanessa, and we see, of course, at the end of the episode too, where he has Vanessa's lover held in the cell that he and Daredevil fought back in season 3, and we see that bloody painting up there as well, another reference to earlier seasons. 3.
I do like how they keep doing that too, which is really nice to keep throwing back. Like I said, people, like I mentioned it in one of our other podcasts on something else, that they actually went back and they researched what they did, and they're tying it in so that people will think, oh, maybe I should go watch season 1, 2, and 3 just to see what they're talking. What is this? What is that? Now this makes sense. One thing I noticed, I don't know if anyone else, I'm sure everyone else did too, but when the Kingpin was the Kingpin, he was wearing white, and now that he's the mayor, he's wearing black. Kind of two sides of his own same coin. I wonder if he'll switch back to the white suit sometime in this season.
It wouldn't surprise me, or maybe that's at the end of, like, in the finale or something like that. We see him come out in the white suit. But it's interesting to watch what's going on with the Kingpin too, as he's struggling with the aspect he has to go through all these political hoops and play these political games, which is not what he wants to do.
No.
He wants to go in there and make things happen, and he can't. And I think that's been very interesting. I think we're going to look back on this episode, and it's really going to be the episode where we see it's like, okay, we got through those first 4 episodes, and I think the show is going to just take a massive leap. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But here at True Believers, we do things in phases. We just hit phase 1. I'm a little off my game tonight. It's tax season. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit all over the place. But let's get back into doing things. And of course, Kevin's not here, and he has a Tesseract. So that's
I have
all the way.
What
do you have, Kat?
An Eggerack.
An Eggerack. Okay, we'll
little powerful Tesseract in an egg.
Well, I'm going to test it out, see how much energy it's got, because I'm going to shift us into phase 2 of this episode. Of course, it is phase 2, where we are talking about Daredevil Born Again, episode 4, Sic Semper Systema. And right now, phase 2 means one thing: Marvel trivia, and I have got some for this episode. I'll start off with Muse, because Muse is shown on screen, the serial-killing supervillain artist from the comics, whose murals have already been seen in episodes of Daredevil Born Again released thus far. However, Muse is seen now carrying a body into the subway tunnels, alluding to the most disturbing part of his creative process. At the end of this episode, we see Muse draining a man's blood, teasing his work in the comics where he would paint his murals using his victim's blood. Kat, we talked about this in our reaction. Oh my, this is scary. The way they're doing this is a horror movie with him.
Horror movie, maybe, but I'm thinking more like psychosis.
Psychotic?
Thriller? Not psychotic. Like a psychosis thriller. Like he's psychotic and he has schizophrenia and he has psychosomatic problems. So psychosis. We'll go with psychosis thriller. But definitely like, ooh, whoa.
Yeah.
That was a dark ending.
Yeah. We're going to get into Muse here a little bit deeper later in this episode. But the other piece of trivia I found, of course, the title of this episode, Sic Semper Systema, and of course we see that photo here with it written over the Punisher logo. But I found this little piece of trivia interesting. This episode title, Sic Semper Systema, is Latin for thus always to the system. It is a play on the Latin phrase Sic Semper Tyrannis, which translates to thus always to tyrants, a phrase intended to mean that the tyrannical leaders will inevitably be overthrown. It is also used to refer to the fact that ends justify the means philosophy is almost always self-defeating in the end, specifically in regard to leaders throughout history that had good and justified intentions, but achieved them using immoral and unjust methods that brought down their downfall and caused them to be remembered as tyrants. So by extension, Sic Semper Systema is referring to the fact that while Fisk may have some good intentions for the city as mayor, most of his reasons for being mayor are selfish and to gain even more power. That, combined with his immoral and tyrannical methods of implementing both his good and bad intentions, will ultimately lead to his downfall and the downfall of the entire system that he is attempting to build. So, working the title in with some pretty heavy meaning there, Kat.
I did not know that, and that actually makes 100% sense now. Now I know why the title is what it is.
Yeah, so a great job there by the writers and everything. But finally, too, a little bit of White Tiger thing still going on. Receiving Hector Ayala's belongings from the coroner, Matt Murdock noticeably receives both the White Tiger mask and amulet, opening the door for the mantle to be taken up by a new hero. Murdock in the hallway is met by Angela Del Toro, Hector's niece, who is notably the second White Tiger in the original Marvel Comics, who similarly inherits the role following Hector's trial and murder on the page. As such, the MCU may go down the same route, especially with a Young Avengers project in the works. Now, Kat, I want to talk about this for just a minute because we've had this discussion about this amulet on other episodes. Mm-hmm. Kevin kind of just feels like it's not really a thing here. We've talked about the power that's in the amulet. There has been a lot of shots in these first 4 episodes when it comes to White Tiger that have focused on this amulet. And very clearly here, it was very much focused on in this shot. I'm starting to believe that they are going to deal with the powers that are in this amulet at some point.
No, we have to. Absolutely. And just to add, I don't know if the viewers watch Eric Voss and his recaps and whatnot. But he said that there was a scene that was cut out right in this area we're looking at on the screen here, that when Angela gets close to Murdock, the amulet was supposed to glow.
Interesting.
And they made a point that there might be an end credit scene somewhere in the last episode. They're not sure yet. It's all hearsay, but it was supposedly filmed that Kamala Harris picks up Angela to be part of the Young Avengers as White Tiger. Now,
interesting. Well,
I don't know
we'll
if that's
see. These
true
are
or
all
not.
rumors and hearsay. It's Marvel.
Exactly.
Who knows?
But Eric Voss, and shout out to him and his YouTube channel, who they do a great in-depth, review of all the episodes. Like, most people do, but his is a pretty deep. That's one that I was like, Young Avengers is coming out soon. That could tie into Daredevil easily because, and then Daredevil could be a sort of a mentor to the Younger Avengers because they're all street level heroes, and he's obviously Daredevil, street level hero.
Yeah. Well,
who knows? Maybe we'll have a Daredevil in Young Avengers.
Not only do we do trivia around here, there's always some fun Easter eggs. And Kat, one of the things, and I didn't talk about this in the plot, but Matt takes on a pro bono case, and I think this is really kind of thing that kind of pushes him over the edge because the guy basically gets arrested for stealing caramel corn.
Yeah, what do they call it? Starts with an F.
Yeah, fun corn or something like. I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I can't remember either.
There's a fun little Easter egg when he's having the conversation with Leroy, who is the gentleman who he was representing, because they bring up Secret Invasion of all things.
They did. That was hilarious. A great shout out, though. But
yeah, so Leroy claims that a scroll was impersonating him and stole the caramel corn from the bodega. Matt obviously doesn't buy it, but it is a good reminder that scrolls are supposedly still hiding as humans following the cliffhanger at the end of 2023 Secret Invasion. Kat, I got to be honest with you. This is fun because I kind of thought Marvel might just want to sweep Secret Invasion under the rug.
Apparently not. Apparently they're still using it because now they mentioned it in one of the best TV shows to date.
And a show I never thought it would. And a show I never expected to get a scroll reference in.
No, I would not have. If you would ask me what show you would have seen a scroll come in on a TV show, I would have said Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or maybe something like that, but I never would have said Daredevil. Not in a million years.
Yeah, not in a million years. But we talked about this earlier in the show, too. When Matt shows Frank Castle's Punisher the bullet he found with Castle's skull logo printed on it, it's clear that the Punisher has no love for the cops who've chosen to idolize him. This mirrors the comics where Frank similarly does not care for officers or military members who've chosen him as a role model, preferring that they look up to somebody like Captain America instead. Promos and posters for Netflix Punisher series did feature similar custom skull bullet casings with the skull logo as well. So, again, throwing it back to things they've done in the past. I'm loving the fact Marvel with the show is bringing in so much of that Netflix universe. For so long, Kat, we thought it was going to be dead and buried, and they've just flipped the script on it, and it was the absolute right decision. Keep it up.
Yes.
And two, we talked about this a little earlier too, but Matt Murdock is shown returning to his life as Daredevil, opening up a locked away part of his apartment on the roof, featuring multiple Daredevil masks, helmets, which were most likely designed by Luke Jacobson, the superhero costume designer who debuted in She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. As such, the parallel between Murdock and Fisk at the end of the episode is easy to see. I love this shot. I love seeing all these masks, Kat, and paying tribute to pretty important eras of Daredevil as well, from the yellow mask, which we saw in She-Hulk, the traditional red Daredevil mask, the darker red Daredevil mask, and the two different black masks as well. And even though we haven't seen some of those costumes as of yet, if you're a Daredevil fan from the comics, you know exactly what the meaning of those different masks are.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, it was definitely fun to see the yellow. I love seeing the two black ones, and of course, classic red. You can never go wrong. Like the more slightly like comfortable looking one, and then the more like reinforced looking one.
Yeah. Again, they're just doing such a phenomenal job with that.
I have a something I want to say. If you can go back to the picture of the bullet.
Yeah.
For those people who don't know, Daredevil has the ability to touch things. Like he can read a newspaper just by touching the ink and tell you what it says instead of reading Braille. Can you imagine how tough it had to have been when he found that bullet case to read that skull logo on it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the detail to put into that etching on how to get it on that bullet case where he could actually feel it. Amazing.
Yeah.
That's a great detail for the writers and action directors and all that stuff to do this. Just to make that so fine-tuned that he could touch it and feel it. And he's like, damn, that's a great, callback to Daredevil as well.
Yeah. Well, and I found this interesting when I heard this, and then I really thought about it, and I realized it's true. Punisher calls Benjamin Poindexter Bullseye, which is remarkably the first time the Assassin's Comics codename has actually been voiced in the MCU, suggesting that the media recently came up with the name following Bullseye's most recent attack. Kat, I was kind of blown away by this. I could have sworn back in the original Netflix run they called him Bullseye, but they never did.
I don't think they did. I don't recall them saying actually Bullseye. I don't recall that anywhere except for the movie, which we don't want to talk about.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, that just kind of blew my mind when you think about it. It's just one of those things you kind of take for granted sometimes. And
so we know that's Bullseye. Wait,
yeah.
They didn't have said Bullseye though.
Yeah. So, but that wraps up all the Easter eggs and trivia for this episode. Let's move into phase 3. Talk about some comic connections and get into some of the deeper plot points. I hope we haven't drained that battery yet on that, Cat.
Nope, it's still lit up.
Okay, good. So again, we are talking Daredevil Born Again, episode 4, Sic Semper Systema. Now, guys, one of the big things that happened in this episode is we've been seeing little bits and pieces of Muse, whether it's been his sketch, his paint, his artwork. We've seen him briefly in a couple of episodes, but we got the full Muse experience here. And I want to kind of go into a little bit of description about Muse from the comics, because this is a very interesting character. While Kingpin and Bullseye are two, if not the most famous Daredevil villains, the trailers for Daredevil Born Again hint at a new threat, one far more dangerous. The character in question is Muse, a villain who was created after the MCU began and even debuted after the Daredevil series premiered. Despite being a new character ever since he debuted in Marvel Comics, Muse has been a villain that the fans have wanted to see. So we're going to get into everything we know about Muse. Muse was created by writer Charles Soule and artist Ron Garney. He first appeared in Daredevil Volume 5, number 11 in 2016, 6 months after Daredevil Season 2 aired on Netflix. Muse is a serial killer artist who plans shocking mass murders, abductions, and torture as a means of creating his art. He is, in the comics, an enhanced individual, but it is not known if he is a mutant, inhuman, or got his powers from a scientific experiment. He not only possesses super strength, but also has advanced speed, which makes him hard to catch. His body also creates a sensory vortex, which makes it hard for Daredevil to track. Currently, it is unknown if Muse in the MCU will be superpowered or if he will be a normal serial killer. In his first appearance, one of his art pieces involved possessing the corpses of 6 dead Inhumans. When Daredevil and another vigilante, Blindspot, tracked Muse down as he was preparing a new art display, the villain showed how dangerous he was. Muse gouged out Blindspot's eyes and then broke his own fingers to rob Daredevil of the satisfaction of inflicting that form of revenge on him. While the MCU Daredevil has dealt with violent individuals, none have been quite like Muse. Daredevil has primarily dealt with gangsters, mob bosses, and assassins, but Muse is a serial killer. The best source comparison would be John Doe from Seven. They are very spot on with that piece of information as well. But I got a little bit more here. As of this writing, Muse has only been in the comics for nearly 9 years. In that time, he has made 10 comic book appearances. The most recent appearance was in Daredevil Hell Unleashed, which hit shelves on January 8th, 2025, just 1 week before the Daredevil Born Again trailer was released. A nice bit of brand synergy between Marvel Comics and the film and television side to cross-promote one another. While elements of his original story will appear in Daredevil Born Again, it is likely the series will draw heavily from his second story arc, one that ties in with the Punisher and the Kingpin. Now, Kat, we've talked about this multiple times. This might be the scariest villain in the MCU that we've seen.
I would say the creepiest.
Yeah, the creepiest and just the most terrifying because of what he is.
Yeah, no doubt. He is definitely, I would put him in the top 10 easily for people like Daredevil, Spider-Man, Street Level. But man, he's definitely I'd say even top 5 actually. He's right up there. He's Yeah, he's
Well,
right up there.
obviously, when we're talking MCU, when we go looking like the superpower villains like a
Right.
Loki or a Thanos, that's a different thing. I
Yeah, no,
think though.
I meant top five, like in the street level, kind of like,
Oh yeah,
you know.
yeah. No, and I know exactly what you. But I truthfully think though he is he is the most terrifying villain that we've seen since David Tennant's Kilgrave.
I was just gonna say that. Could you imagine if him and Kilgrave teamed up? Oh my god.
Yeah, that I don't even want to think about that. But yeah, I think the Muse. We're in for some pretty graphic things with Muse
Oh,
over the next few episodes.
I have a feeling that the next 4 episodes are gonna have that little warning, TV MA adult violent graphic
Yeah,
on it.
it would not surprise me in the least.
Yeah. You had mentioned Punisher and Kingpin being two of Daredevil's greatest rivals, and you forgot Stiltman. I mean,
Oh well,
how do you forget Stiltman?
Well, him and Kite Man are hanging out somewhere right now. So
I love Stiltman. He's such a funny character.
okay, well, let's get into a couple of our big plots because obviously the big thing of this episode is Frank is back.
Yes.
We saw the return of John Barenthal as Frank Castle, and maybe not in such a great place himself as he calls out Matt on several things. So I'm kind of curious, Kat, how was it for you to see Frank back on the screen, and how much of an effect do you think he had on Matt, not only with what he said to Matt, but Matt seeing the condition that Frank was in as well?
I cheered. I mean, I was like, yes, finally. Because we knew it was coming. We just didn't know when it was coming, which is great for next week's episodes. But regardless, and the whole conversation between him and him pushing the buttons on Daredevil, calling him Red, talking about Foggy was great, and sort of just making Matt sort of like snap out of his ho-hum, like, how do I go on? How do I do it? To make him like think, well, shoot, maybe I should redon the mantle, as we see at the end of the episode, And then, of course, Daredevil talking to him with similar effects and making him think about what happened with his kids and his family and why he does what he does. And his somewhat sidelong glances off to nothing of like, what's going on over there? But nothing is there, obviously, because he's talking to Daredevil, but making him sort of snap out of his devoid emotion of not wanting to help and going, oh, well, maybe I should step up now because people are doing something in my name and I don't want that to happen because they're not me, But definitely, I think they both did it off each other and made them both sort of snap out of the ho-hum way to rejoin the society as Daredevil and Punisher as opposed to Matt and Frank.
See, one of the things I found real interesting too, because I love the conversation. I mentioned that earlier, but you see Frank, he's obviously not ready to get out there again yet, but you see he has the whole setup. And one of the things that Matt says to him is, you could be doing more with this setup. And Frank is just like, yeah, he's doing his thing, but I'm seeing it interesting how these two, which have such a different look on how they carry out their vigilante justice, but they're both trying. You can see this little dance going on between them where they're both trying to pull each other out of it in a way, whether they even realize they're doing it or not. I think Frank is much more aware than Matt is, but you hear Matt makes comments through this whole conversation that when he seems like he's trying to pull Frank out of his whatever he's got going on in his own head too. And the history of Daredevil and the Punisher really is so intriguing. And I think it really played up well on this of their relationship, both in the comics and what they've established within the MCU shows already. And I mean, Barenthal and Cox are such presence as these two characters.
Oh,
I mean, they just eat up the scenery and the dialogue in this, and by the end of that conversation, you're itching to see them both get back into action.
No doubt. And I do love that they showed him disheveled, looking like he'd been spending a lot of time down there.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that the next week's episode will show him, like, just the hair falling off his beard and going back with a clean cut look that he has in the picture you're showing right now. Just give us the Punisher. But as you said, they have a love-hate relationship. They know they have to work together at certain times, but they know they're on a sort of opposite sides at the same time. Being that Frank will kill and Daredevil won't.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think they're going to play up more on this as this season goes along. But as I talked about earlier, this show really has been the two sides of the same coin that are the Kingpin and Daredevil. And we talked about it a little bit in our instant reactions, but I want to get into it a little deeper because there's a lot going on with the Kingpin. So topic 2 is you may make him mayor, but you can't take the Kingpin out of it. Wilson Fisk also likes to get things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible, which is why he wants to bring business back to the so-called Red Hook Port District of New York. Sadly, not even Fisk's bullish determination can get past city codes and red tape, but the new mayor does begrudgingly agree to go through the process. Unfortunately for Fisk, not only does he have to sit through not one, but 2 bad covers of We Built the City, but his prized pupil, Daniel Blake, played by Michael Gandolfini, has accidentally leaked Fisk's big expansion plans to reporter B.B. Urich. After getting too drunk, now Fisk is being called a union buster, which is not what he needs considering his marriage problems and rebellion from his criminal underlings. After a comedic smash cut showing Fisk raging in his office, it almost appears that the once feared crime boss is starting to lose control. Fisk claims his meeting with Adam had no expression of harm or ill intent. Notably, the former Kingpin referred to himself as the ill intent in season 1 of Daredevil when he shared the parable of the Good Samaritan following his initial arrest. Now, one other thing too, and at the end of the episode, we see in a more secure part of his home, Fisk is holding Adam hostage. Through this room also contains the classic white painting that first brought him into contact with his wife in the OG series. It also includes the blood splatter from Fisk and Daredevil's brawl in the finale of Daredevil season 3. Talking to his wife about everything his father did and didn't teach him, Fisk opens his story the same way he'd shared many stories about his past in the original Netflix series. We see it very obviously in this episode, Kat.
Mm-hmm.
His frustrations, his not being able to do things the way he thought he was going to be able to do things, going from being this crime boss that is the Kingpin who has complete control of everything, everybody bowing to his will, having to deal with this red tape and his frustrations that are happening. And we see obviously what he does with Adam and a few other things. It's the pressure's getting to him, and he's starting the cracks are starting to show.
Yeah, I had a thought on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had mentioned the where he wants to do the building on the docks.
Mm-hmm.
That also could pay homage to Echo, the last episode, where she blew up his other dock in, I think it was Jersey. That might be why he's trying to push this faster, so that he had the new place to do his shipping, so he can ship as the Kingpin instead of as Wilson Fisk. That could be another thing as well. Just a thought. I mean, throwing that out there.
Yeah. The other thing is we have that scene after the news leak to B.B. Urich, and he's confronting his aides, and it's so interesting to watch that scene. And I got to give a shout out here to Michael Gandolfini as Daniel Blake, because he steps up, he takes the blame for everything, but he's like this sniveling little kiss ass about it still. And you talked about earlier how the shot made the Kingpin look so huge in comparison to the two of them. And you're sitting here going the whole time, is this where he breaks? Is he going to take one of them out? Because I was thinking
the same thing.
I honestly thought in that final moment he was going to turn and break her neck.
I didn't think that. I thought he was going to break his neck, because the way he put his hand on his shoulder and tapped him, not break his neck, but maybe a good solid punch to the face. I'm like, oh, no, I guess not. Okay.
But knowing Wilson Fisk from the comics, too, that's how he would have sent a message to him, because I like the fact he talks about how much he wants loyal people, and he sees the loyalty that he has, but you better never effing do it again either.
Yeah, I love that. That line that he said to him, if you ever do this again, it's just like, I don't want to fuck up again. Pardon my French.
No,
I don't want to mess up again.
You're good.
But it's like, I can see where he would slap the woman, or punch the woman, or something like that, just to make his point. But I think that character is going to be more useful somewhere down the line. I'm not sure why I have that feeling, but I think she might be a breaking point for King to return to Kingpin. In maybe episode 6, end of 6, maybe 7, where he breaks and goes back to being Kingpin, as opposed to Wilson.
Well, I also think she's playing her own power play because when she was talking to um, Daniel Blake, she also was talking about how she was here with the previous mayor. She was with the mayor before him. She'll be here after Fisk is mayor. She's got herself in a little power position, she thinks, and I think it's going to come back to bite her in the ass as well.
Yeah, like I said, I think end of episode 6, maybe episode 7, she will no longer be around. I think he will snap, go back to being the Kingpin. And you mentioned something that I thought was kind of cool too. When we show him, I loved how they did the symmetry of when he's walking down the steps to go to his private bunker in the bottom of his house. At the same time, they showed Matt going up the steps to his roof. I like how they kept doing that symmetry of them, going up and down. Just so much detail.
Yeah, again, you talk about the symmetry between the two of them. One is going back to his depths. The other is rising up to become Daredevil again. And
I can't wait.
It's been just everything about this, as far as telling the two stories of Matt becoming Daredevil again and Wilson Fisk looking like he might be headed becoming to the Kingpin again. They went through these trials of trying something different, and they're becoming born again, but they're going to be different after being born again. Even though they're going back to their original ways, it's going to be different. And it's a rebirth of Daredevil and the Kingpin of this series. And I think that's what's more people are talking about, is the fact it's not just Daredevil born again. It really is Kingpin born again. And
it's both of them.
Done such a phenomenal job with it. Obviously, Cox and D'Onofrio are amazing in these roles, and they're nailing it beautifully. So, yeah, just a great shout out to them. But guys, it is time to enter our final phase. Do we have enough energy left, Kat? Are we?
Just enough.
Yeah, just like the old Nintendo cartridge, just blow on it a little. As we are entering our final phase for this episode, phase 4, some of our final thoughts and predictions for this episode. Again, this has been covering Daredevil, episode 4, Sic Semper Systema. And of course, this has been a major spoiler reaction show. We hope you've enjoyed it, but we're going to get into some of our final thoughts of this episode and what we might be seeing ahead. So, Kat, I'm going to let you lead off. What are your final thoughts on this episode, and what do you think we're in line for? Because we're only a couple of weeks away from having 2 episodes drop.
Well, like we were saying in the beginning before we started the podcast, this is my second favorite episode. Like you mentioned, the scene when Fisk and Daredevil are talking in the cafe, with Daredevil and Punisher talking in the bunker. This was a great, almost like a revelation episode for Daredevil and Punisher to come back, and why they should come back. Muse, and of course the whole thing with Kingpin and his wife and everything they've been going through, and then Kingpin as the mayor and everything he's going through. Almost like like you say, two sides of the same coin. Like, he wants to be the Kingpin, but he wants to be the mayor, but he wants it done fast, but he can't because he has to be the mayor. And just great freaking episode for what it was. Again, number 2 right now of the 4. But coming forward, we have that 2-part with episode coming up, which I'm super excited for. And as I said, I'm hoping it's going to be 10 or 15 minutes of plot build up, and then action for the last 10 or 15, 20 minutes. And the next episode, finishing up the action scenes, on a great cliffhanger or something like that. Maybe the Muse holding Daredevil and Frank by his hands over a building, getting ready to drop him or something. Just something oh my God, give me the next episode so bad. And then some action, and then tying it off with some more plot build up for the final 2 episodes.
I think you're pretty on point there. The setup has been beautiful, but it's time to get things moving. This episode, I think, is the penultimate episode of not the season, but of getting us into the action that we love from Daredevil. And I think the next episodes, we're looking at the beginning of the hunt for Muse, Matt returning to Daredevil, Frank coming back as full Punisher, Wilson Fisk continuing his descent back into being the Kingpin. I think we'll have a few little bumps in the road before we fully get completely there, but I think we are going to ramp up the action greatly. I think the horrific side of Muse is going to be really shown in the next episode as well. I think that's going to be a major plot point in the next episode. And just the ride they have us on. And I know some people have said, oh, I wish there had been more action in these episodes. But everybody I personally talked to about what Daredevil's done so far, everybody is so pulled in and intrigued. And I think the first person Matt is going after is the dirty cops.
Absolutely.
And Frank will probably get involved with that somehow. And I think it's going to get pretty bloody. And I think we're going to see another confrontation between Frank and Matt before this all said and done. But I think the roller coaster, we've hit that peak and we're looking over the edge and we're about to drop and begin the wild ride. And I really think that's where we're headed there. So
I got my seatbelt on.
Yeah, and you better have it on because it's going to be crazy and it's going to be a lot of fun and it's going to give us what we've been missing a little bit from these first 4 episodes is the action. So, and I still think we got some foggy stuff that we might have to be dealing with before it's all said and done as well.
Mm-hmm. So I don't see why we wouldn't.
But again, we want to thank you for joining us here on True Believers. We've been talking Daredevil episode 4. And again, this is the True Believers podcast on the Fandom Podcast Network, covering everything that's happening in the MCU. We got Daredevil going on right now. The Thunderbolts is right around the corner. I am so excited. I cannot wait for that. And a lot of other things happening in the MCU. It's going to be a busy summer. Of course, this is the Fandom Podcast Network. We appreciate you guys listening and watching. Please give us a like and a subscribe. And share us out if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to one of our podcasts, please subscribe. You can find us on all the major podcast catchers out there. We cover a lot of things around here, and we have a lot of fun. Of course, too, if you're watching YouTube right now, we've again our new QR code takes you right to the Podbean master feed for all of our audio shows. You can sign up there and just enjoy what we do. We love feeding your ears with great new podcasts. And of course, you can find us on social media. We just recently have been on Blue Sky, having a lot of fun there. You can find us there at FanPod Network. You can find us at FanPod Network on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days. Of course, we have all our wonderful Facebook groups too, including our Fandom Podcast Network and our True Believers group. Come on, join in, have the fun. We have some great discussions and talk and keep you updated on the news that's going on as well. You can find Kevin all over social media at Spartan_Phoenix. On Blue Sky, it's just Spartan Phoenix. You can find me, Kyle, all over social media, either on Blue Sky, X at AKyleW. You can find me on Facebook. That's Kyle Wagner. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at AKyle Fandom. Cap, where can people find you sniffing around and maybe looking for some chimichangas and stuff like that? Because you are Cap.
Chimichangas. Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Everything at StaticCat1.
Yeah. And of course, TeePublic too. We have a great relationship with TeePublic, where you can find all the gear of the Fandom Podcast Network, whether it's shirts for True Believers. Love that blue. But we have all kinds of things representing all of our shows, whether it's mugs, hats, they even have pillows, phone cases, laptop cases, all kinds of things, sweatshirts. TeePublic is usually at least twice a month always running a good sale. We do get a little kickback here to help us keep the Tesseract powered up and keep things running here on the network. But you know what? We just appreciate your support. And if you want to wear our colors, we are so thankful for it. But guys, this has been the latest episode of True Believers, where we have been talking Daredevil Born Again. Episode 4, Sic Semper Systema. Kat, thank you so much for joining me to talk more Daredevil. I know you've been loving this series. It's been a blast so far, and we are just beginning the wild ride. We're hoping Kevin will be back next week to join us to talk, I think, some major things that are going to be happening in Daredevil. But for now, we're going to close out this episode. And as always, Excelsior True Believers. And until next time, make ours Marvel.